As far as the Knights are concerned, we're under the salary cap. 2 players have been moved on earlier the year and we haven't replaced them, so Blind Freddie knows that we're not breaching the cap.
According to Newcastle Alliance Chairman Paul Murphy, every day the state government dithers on its decision on whether to cut the rail line at Wickham, a $650 million redevelopment of the CBD becomes less likely. It's crunch time for General Property Trust, which says it'll walk away from its Newcastle plan if the rail line remains. A scoping study promised by the then Premier Rees last year and due for release last month is still under wraps. It's expected to iron out the costings on cutting the line and building an interchange.
It's important because State Rail indicated that it would be $600 million to do the work. HDC said it would be probably $180 to $200 million to do the work, and now we're saying, please, just give us an answer as to what the actual independent study shows us it to be.
The government has had the Hunter Development Corporation's taxpayer-funded blueprint for the city for over a year.
All the surveys have shown that there's 70, 80, 90% of the people want to see the implementation of the Hunter Development Corporation report. Yet Sydney, and I believe it's Sydney, are not supporting Jody and the local people up here about wanting to get things changed in Newcastle. So we really do blame the current Premier and the government and the instrumentality in Sydney in not supporting Newcastle.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Certainly there will be impacts. This will be going on exhibition for 28 days and I'll be very interested in the feedback that we're going to be getting. There are some recommendations in here that are most unpalatable and I'll certainly be raising concerns with those myself.
Noise forecasts for the Joint Strike Fighter have plunged land values and development approvals into uncertainty in parts of Port Stephens near the Saltash bombing range. The Mayor says he has no problem with the RAF base or the planned new jets, but the weapons range is a relic of the past.
It's not 1942 when they used to fire out of Mustang propeller aircraft. Now they've got a $1 billion aircraft that's flying over residential area to a great degree, Madawi, Lemon Tree Passage, Oyster Cove, Tanubba Bay and those places. So I think it's about time that the Defence Department look at the location of the bombing range with a view of shifting it.
The Council will press its point to the Defence Minister during a meeting next month.
There's no way in the wide world I'm going to support the Defence Department to devalue people's homes and have blocks of land that they can't build on. To me, that's totally unsatisfactory.
I believe they should be able to build. We're not talking under a flight path at Mascot. We're talking about what is nearly a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week operation.
Over my dead body, they won't be able to do anything.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
We've selected a number of graffiti spots. Some are small spots on local signs, others are on fences and so forth. And we'll eradicate those.
Clearing the way for a greener future. This site reserved for a $5 million experiment.
Hopefully if we can get success sometime next year, it will be a major breakthrough for solar energy.
The plans for a solar farm with 450 mirrors. They'll generate temperatures of 900 degrees, the heat directed to a 30-metre high power tower similar to this one.
When it's completed, this project will be the largest of its type in the world. So when we say largest of its type, it's a high temperature solar thermal system using a gas turbine to generate electricity.
Solar energy has always been limited because it requires water to work. Scientists say this new technology will effectively replace those steam-based systems and perhaps make it cheaper for us to harness energy from the sun.
Fossil fuel based systems are going up in price, so at some point in the future they're going to cross paths.
And that's a glimmer of hope for our precious environment. Nat Wallace, NBN News.
They've got to take some responsibility in a footy side, particularly when we get down their end of the field. At times we're disjointed and looked a little bit like we'd only just met each other.
It wasn't that long ago there were fears the Knights could lose anything up to $1 million last year, so today's confirmation of a $116,000 profit had the club's boss rightfully chuffed.
The most pleasing thing is that we've improved the bottom line by $1.4 million over the last 2 years through some pretty difficult circumstances.
A reduction in costs outside the football program and increases in all revenue streams other than home game earnings is behind the turnaround. Had it not been for the ongoing redevelopment of Energy Australia Stadium, the figure could even have been higher, renewing confidence the club doesn't need to privatise anytime soon.
People who go through our numbers will see the only areas that we've suffered are those related to the stadium. I think it's a good model, and I think it can generate profits of probably $500,000 a year once the stadium is completed.
There's always a but, and for the Knights it's an accumulated debt of around $2.5 million which remains an issue.
There probably is a need to get some capital injection into the business, and we'll be looking at a number of forms, a number of ways of doing that and putting that to members over the coming months.
That means privatisation and any number of financial models will continue to be researched for possible adoption in the future and is likely to be a hot topic at the club's annual general meeting in 4 weeks.
Kylie, you saw yourself in the mirror a few seconds ago. What did you think?
It was amazing. I couldn't believe the difference. Doing a great job and so fast.
Rick Harper was halfway through his flight when disaster struck.
I was on descent into Williamtown airspace and sitting on about 125 knots on descent, and the windscreen imploded.
Covered in the shattered windscreen and struggling with the controls, he tried to issue a mayday.
Well, I started to, and the headsets blew off. Literally, the air pressure just blew them straight off my head. So without a headset, you can't make a call.
Mr. Harper then drew on his 20 years of flying experience and the wise words of world-famous aviator Bob Hoover to help him avert disaster.
He said, if you're going to crash a plane, pick the softest, cheapest thing to crash into and control the plane as far into the crash as you possibly can, and you'll walk away from it 9 times out of 10. So that's what I did, and here I am.
Police have praised his actions.
He's been able to do a very good job of putting it on the beach without actually going into the water.
Incredibly, Mr. Harper walked away from the crash landing with only a bump to his nose. His homemade modified Murphy Rebel wasn't so lucky. It's now missing a right wheel, has a tattered propeller and damaged undercarriage. Mr. Harper says that is the most painful part of the whole experience.
It took me 5 years to build this, now it's going to take me the best part of that to rebuild it.
The plane will be dismantled and transported back to Sydney. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Seven-year-old Ebony starved to death at her Hawks Nest home in 2007. Her mother was convicted of murder, her father of manslaughter. The need for better reporting and action on child abuse has prompted the state government to open 3 new call centres in Dubbo, Wollongong and Wallsend. Today, a happy occasion with the launch of the Wallsend unit.
The very sad case of Ebony was one of the reasons that the Wood inquiry was commenced last year. So certainly these reforms are targeted at addressing those sort of problems and hopefully those not happening again.
Run by Hunter New England Health, the Wallsend operation will take calls from Hunter health workers who are concerned about all levels of child abuse.
It will take calls from mandatory reporters who are health workers, provide advice to those staff in relation to concerns that they might have about children. It will also direct staff to services, local services.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
We're just very concerned with the local area and what the impact's going to have. It's been a beautiful place, we love it, and we don't want to see big fences up all over the place, just destroying the local aesthetics.
In July, 94 years since the Battle of Fromelles, the last of the soldiers found buried in mass graves will each be given their own plot. 75 of the 250 exhumed bodies have been identified, including about 10 from the Hunter. Today, Belmont Christian College students heard from Professor Richard Wright, who worked on the project as a forensic archaeologist. He says it was painstaking work.
Keeping all the artefacts that were attached to the bodies in the right place, making sure that you haven't mixed up the rising sun with another body that's just right on top of the first one you're dealing with. This requires meticulous work.
A group of 22 students from the school will travel to Fromelles for the reinterment ceremony, the only school students to represent Australia.
I believe it'll be life-changing for these kids. I have heard of others who have been to do similar things, but this special event and the personal touch that it's going to have on these kids' lives, I think it will be literally life-changing for them.
I have a great-great-uncle who died on the Western Front, and so that gives a lot of personal relevance to it. Yeah.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
They're not household names yet, but any one of these apprentices could be on their way to a glittering career. With legendary hoop Malcolm Johnston in their corner, they're off to the best possible start.
We're here to pat them on the back and show them their good rides and then kick them up the butt if there's a bad one in there. But they've got to learn from their mistakes, and that's what this day's all about.
The hunter is steeped in racing history, but Johnston says the last great apprentice to take Sydney by storm was Wayne Harris in the 1970s. Malcolm believes Blake Spriggs has the potential, but he's not alone. 20-year-old Joel Nelson rode in his first official race on Sunday. Despite being small in stature, he's got a familiar battle on his hands.
Keep my weight down. That's my number one goal. And then the second goal, probably outride my claim. But it's a little while to go yet.
For 24-year-old Claire Pettigrew, a love of horses blossomed into a full-time job, and she's still smiling after a tough first year.
I got sick from dieting, wasn't doing it properly, so I got sent to a dietitian and fixed all that up, and then I had an accident. I had a horse flip over and land on top of me and tore a few muscles in my leg, so I was out for 3 months.
These days, apprentices are even briefed on handling the media, today learning the finer points from NBN's own Nat Wallace. The lessons are already sinking in.
I guess I can just learn from this and maybe I can know what to say next time.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The Lord Mayor hit the news today, found guilty of violating the council's code of conduct.
Quite simply, he breached a code of conduct.
It all started back in 2007 when one of Con Constantine's companies contributed $6,500 to John Tate's failed state election campaign. Last year, when Mr Constantine's plan for markets at Maryville came up, Councillor Tate declared his conflict of interest but didn't step out of the chamber during the discussions. Instead, he used his casting vote to invite public feedback on whether the local environment plan should be amended to allow the markets. The amendment was later voted down, but complaints from community members prompted an independent inquiry which confirmed a breach. It's curious though, reviewer Mark Brady found the Lord Mayor actually had no conflict of interest in the matter, but said he failed to explain the situation well enough.
In other words, it's not what I said, but the way that I said it, according to him. Well, I don't accept that that's something that's serious.
One of the complainants was Maryville resident Chris Breen, who has lived in Newcastle for 3 years and hasn't ruled out running for council himself.
I don't wear a political colour. What I want is whatever the party, Labor, Greens, Independents, I want them to behave with dignity, with honesty and with great respect.
It's estimated the inquiry cost ratepayers about $4,000. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The much-debated rail line was the backdrop for a lunchtime gathering. Worth Place, one of 7 locations between Wickham and Newcastle, Save Our Rail is proposing for pedestrian level crossings.
Steel Street's our number one priority for a crossing. We'd also like to have one at Worth Place, which is quite obvious when you stand here. You can see that it should be a crossing.
It's part of that group's solution to a problem it seems each side of the debate acknowledges, a lack of connectivity between Honeysuckle and the city.
Maximum to put in the 7 crossings that we're after, and at the same time also upgrade the signalling, would be around about $60 to $70 million.
Among the supporters today, a cheeky campaigner from the rival Fix Our City camp. Paul Murphy taking issue with Save Our Rail's new but familiar-looking posters and its pedestrian plan.
Well, we've investigated that, and the Hunter Development Corporation have investigated, which is the government body, and said that's not a possibility for it to take place, so therefore it's not an option.
And while his group continues to lobby for the cutting of the rail line, Save Our Rail says it's not going anywhere.
The fight will continue because the people are very determined to keep this rail line.
This is a wake-up call. In 12 months or 2 years' time, we'll be screaming for trade skills. Now's the time to take them on. And we're putting young people onto life's journey, set for life.
Both my brother and I lost our sister to cancer a few years back, and we've been on a couple of charity rides through Queensland and that. We thought, well, if we're going for this ride, why not try and do something for the Cancer Council?
I'm going to try the one blue, one pink this weekend on Friday night footy. I was talking to the sponsors and they said just try one of both. So get it out there, and the boys are going to take the pair of blue boots around for a ride around the block.
Judging from the mood in the Newcastle camp, it's clear the game against Brisbane can't come quick enough as the Knights try to erase the memory of last week's loss to the Sharks.
Look, last week's well and truly done and dusted. Obviously it wasn't good enough performance and we need to improve.
You need the right attitude to come into an NRL game, and we definitely lacked that.
The Knights admit they can't afford the same lack of energy against the Broncos, a side which is always tough at home.
Any team with that many class players still in there, like a Folau, Lockyer, Big Sam Thaiday, those sort of players are still a dangerous footy side, that's for sure.
The halves pairing of Mullen and Rogers will come under scrutiny after Newcastle was held scoreless until the dying minutes in Cronulla.
They need to do better. We need to get our team organised better. The rest of the players need to be able to respond to them, and we need to be able to fire some bullets, and that's something we didn't do well on last Saturday night.
Mullen believes the forwards need to shoulder more responsibility.
Every loss and that type of stuff falls back on the halves, and but we need a forward pack that's sort of going forward for us and laying a good platform so us halves and outside backs can play.
One of those forwards will be prop Ben Cross after he was cleared of a neck injury.
No, all fine. I got a sort of specialist, got the scans, all that sort of stuff. Nothing new showed up in the neck scans and all that sort of stuff. He goes absolutely fine to play and no lasting effects.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. The tranquility of Merewether Beach is a far cry from the streets of Rio, but Matt Hall admits he's itching to get to Brazil to prepare for round 3. Unlike most of his rivals, Hall is flying blind when it comes to several courses around the world.
They're using the training to try and tune what they did at the last time they were there, whereas I'm using the training to really figure out where the fast lines are in the track and where the risk is as well.
But a lack of experience hasn't hindered his progress. Hall's second place in Perth came on another circuit he'd never seen. Just 8 races into his career, he's already considered a serious threat.
Initially there was a view that I was the young guy and just pushed me aside. A couple of terms of beginner's luck, but I'm still having beginner's luck apparently, so we're on the right track.
The former fighter pilot says his short-term goal is to simply concentrate on his own mistakes. Having overcome the nerves of flying in front of 100,000 Australians, the most pressure he'll feel this round is on one of the 4 flights he'll take to get to Brazil.
The tighter I get, the more concerned I get that something's going to go wrong. So it's not that I don't trust all the airline pilots in the world, it's just a natural instinct that if I'd just rather be up there myself doing it.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
After countless hurdles and hold-ups, this afternoon Keith Stronach signed off on a lease with the Green Group to operate Merewether's new surf house.
It's fantastic. Just relieves, I guess, and actually probably more excited because it was something that we've been working for so long, and then you get to the point where it actually happens, and we know that now that this is the way forward.
The Green Group currently own and operate the Greenwood Hotel at North Sydney and Pontoon Bar at Cockle Bay. They've also managed the Forbes Hotel in Sydney's CBD and Clock Hotel in Surrey Hills. They'll lease Surf House for 50 years and provide work for around 100 full-time and casual employees. In a statement, Executive Director Tony Green said, "We envisage offering something for everyone. There will be a spacious cafe and ice cream bar on the ground floor, the bar and restaurant on the top floor. The middle level will be used for private functions."
This will give us something that will compare, or probably, in my view, will be better than anything that's on the east coast of Australia at the moment.
Newcastle City Council will start demolition work on Surf House on the 17th of May, with construction work of the new building due to start in August, with a completion date set for late next year.
I think it'll be a catalyst for the Merewether Plan of Management, which is proposed by Council at the moment. And this will be the first thing that happens there, and hopefully the rest will follow.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
A beautiful country morning brought the crowds to the annual Tocal Field Days.
Tocal Field Days is really about educating farmers, people interested in farming and anything on the land.
And there's no great surprise where most of the people were, wherever the animals were. There's the dog obedience show, putting most pet dogs to shame, Bosley the steer, teaching students where meat comes from, and the animal nursery. And they were off, well, sort of, for the piglet race. This is the first time these 4-month-old cuties have ever raced, and we're assured they will get better.
They're very, very easy to train, but this is their absolute first race. They haven't been in the track before.
And it wouldn't be a field day without sheep mustering demonstrations, where the dogs start young. But it's not all animals. The field days are also about advice and education. And this is where you'll find most of the men, the machinery, rows and rows of equipment, everything you need to run a property.
It's a 70 horsepower tractor catering for all markets within Australia.
So how much is this going to set me back?
This particular tractor is $44,950 including GST.
That might be a bit outside my budget. The Tocal Field Days run all weekend. Kate Mitchell, NBN News.
This swanky $3.5 million facility, fitted out with every modern learning tool a student could ask for, opened its doors in August. Today, St Philip's Christian College pupils thanked the federal government for contributing $440,000 towards the project during a special school assembly. The middle school building has been specially designed for students between grades 5 and 8.
The architecture of the building has been built around the theme of how we operate in middle school, which is enjoying the journey. So we have curved corridors and learning spaces, so that there's sort of this idea of moving through life and growing and learning.
The school tailors learning for students aged 10 and 14.
It makes a difference because those early adolescence years are very important, and so that the programs are targeted to meet the needs of students at that pre-adolescence and early adolescent age.
That approach has seen the college's population soar.
We've had very good enrolments here. In fact, last year they increased by 50, and then this year again by another 20 or so. So we're at our maximum enrolment capacity.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
We're okay, nobody was injured, so we were maybe a little bit shocked. Other than that, everything's all right.
With the Australian Test team selected on Sunday night, everyone's out to impress, and while Kurt Gidley's selection should be a formality given his history in the green and gold, nothing is a given these days.
The Australian selectors are fairly loyal in that aspect, but I don't think a good game from Kurt wouldn't do his chances any harm.
The captain's motivation, though, is far from personal. He simply wants to improve his club's record of just 2 wins in 7 games.
My priority is to win this game. We've had a rough start of the year and we're not exactly where we wanted to be at the moment. So it's about winning this game for myself and whatever happens from there, mate.
Although defence wasn't great at the weekend against the Sharks, it was Newcastle's effort in attack which caught most attention and only increased pressure on the halves. Newcastle is under no illusion about how tough it is to win at Brisbane, nor how difficult it'll be to reach the playoffs if they don't return with the points.
In the next 4 weeks, we need to make some progress up that ladder if we're going to be a top 8 contender.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. He's built a fearsome reputation, but that proved little defence for Bob Mirovic last night. The 44-year-old knocked down within 15 seconds of the opening round. He survived that, only to face another Leapai onslaught. Boxing to lawn bowls, and Ian McRae has reached the final of the City Masters singles after a nail-biting semi-final win today. Down by 4, McRae fought back to level things up with former winner Ian Lean before drawing the winning shot on his last bowl. McRae will face 4-time champion Sam Lagutsa in the final next Friday after rain washed out play this afternoon. Newcastle Harness Racing Club says it will lose its major backer for tomorrow night's derby if a proposal to switch their dates predominantly to Fridays goes ahead next year.
The people in Sydney have got to realise these decisions they make have far-reaching impacts that they don't consider or they haven't considered.
As for the derby, it's rated one of the strongest fields in years and includes a horse with a difference called 2IC.
He's got a bit of a cult following in harness racing. He only has one eye. And he injured that when he was a yearling, so the owners took the eye out and didn't think he'd ever race. And he's gone on to win over $175,000 in prize money.
Move over, Justin Bieber. And your screaming tweenies. This is part of the Newcastle Orchestra. Led by Newcastle muso Mark Jackson, the orchestra has only been together since November, Add to that, some members such as husband and wife Ted and Betty Campbell had never even picked up a ukulele, let alone played music.
I never ever thought I'd learn music, like at my age, starting to learn music, you're pushing your luck.
Now there's no stopping Ted.
I've got 2 ukuleles, Betty's got a ukulele, and we're right into it now.
I think if you're a bit down in the dumps and maybe lonely, music is the ideal remedy.
It's a distinctly Hawaiian flavour: SpongeBob, white shoes, leis and loud shirts. But this is all about the music and resurgence worldwide of the instrument.
And the uke's just the perfect instrument for people to learn music and to enjoy each other's company. You can take it to a party and you can sort of be inconspicuous and then, oh, I've got a ukulele.
The group will debut at Newcastle's Olive Tree Markets tomorrow. Aloha indeed. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
With the man who attempted to kill him now behind bars, John Janetzakas thought his troubles were over, but the Cessnock cinema owner was dead wrong. Just after 4 p.m. yesterday, these teenagers converged on his business. When he told them to move on, things turned ugly. Mr. Janetzakas was repeatedly spat at, pushed, had 3 bottles thrown at him and was seriously threatened.
That they were going to come back and break into the cinema and set it on fire and blow it up. That they were going to come back and shoot me.
Are those threats you take seriously?
I take every threat seriously after what was set up at the house. I mean, that night they said they were going to come back and blow the shop up, the house up, and they did.
It took 45 minutes and 3 frantic phone calls before police arrived. At 6 p.m, the teenagers returned wearing balaclavas and took turns walking and riding past the cinema, pretending to shoot everyone inside. That time, police took half an hour to respond.
It's as if as soon as we say, it's John from the cinema, it's a gun, oh, okay, here we go again, and we put it on the back burner.
It's taken roughly 1 minute to drive from the cinemas to Cessnock Police Station. Senior officers will now investigate why it took police so long to respond to Mr. Janetzakas' calls for help last night. Officers say they are taking the incident seriously and have seized one of the bottles for forensic testing. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Returning home from Brisbane with 2 valuable competition points, the Knights' 3rd win of the season also released some pressure.
It gives you massive confidence and everyone is out there just ripping in for each other and you play for your mate next year and that's why we do it.
Newcastle started like they usually do, jumping out of the gates to take the lead. But a 12-0 lead turned into a 10-point deficit. Half-time couldn't come quick enough. But the Sheds weren't safe either, with the coach taking aim as well.
We talked in no uncertain terms how important this particular half was.
It worked a treat, with Newcastle scoring the ones that counted, while keeping Brisbane scoreless in the second half to post a much-needed win. Several should find themselves in a range of representative team camps this week, with Kurt Gidley and Kiwi rep Junior Sao strong chances for the Test match, while Zeb Taylor could have played his way into his first New Zealand jumper too.
I think Zeb's shown, particularly last year, he showed he's one of the better sort of back rowers in the competition.
With City country teams also selected, numbers will be down this week, but not morale.
On Tuesday night, Newcastle City councillors will be presented with a $260 million budget for the next financial year, which will include a record spend on maintaining the city's infrastructure.
Back in 2007, we were only spending $7 million on our asset maintenance. We now propose to spend $30 million, so that will be the biggest maintenance program that this council has ever had.
Despite increased costs like the price of water, electricity and council wages, staff have managed to balance the books and rein in a $9 million deficit without axing any jobs. Director of City Assets Steve Edmonds says council has saved money by getting rid of some duplicated services.
Bringing in services so that they're consolidated, such as legal services, financial services. We've also looked at ways that we can gain some really smart efficiencies within the council.
But slugging ratepayers with a 2.6% hike will also generate an additional $2.6 million for council. Big ticket items earmarked in the budget include the city's new museum, which will cost over $20 million, the redevelopment of No. 2 Sports Ground, the implementation of council's coastal revitalisation strategy and the Hunter Street Master Plan. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Quietly spoken at the best of times, Zeb Taylor was completely lost for words when he was told to pack his bags by his national team coach.
Yeah, it feels good, I was excited when I got the news, like straight after the game on Friday night.
He actually got a heads up before the Broncos game. Told he needed a big performance to secure his maiden test jumper, Taylor finished as man of the match to convince even himself he was ready.
If I did get picked, I think I was going off last year's form, but I guess on Friday night I reckon I deserve to be there now.
Joining Taylor is Junior Sao, who's already been there and done that for the Kiwis at last year's Four Nations tournament.
There's a big chance for us, and for me I'm really excited. Got a whole bunch of family coming to watch me, so now I'm looking forward to it.
So too Kurt Gidley, whose big performance on Friday night secured his spot, despite admitting to a few nerves himself.
Especially after missing the start of the year and being unsure of what teams I'll be in. It's still got that buzz about it.
Zetterberg still running on. It's 2IC though, drawing clear of Cut the Attitude and Henrik Zetterberg. 2IC is going to win the derby. 2IC by a long neck. He's got it. Cut the Attitude will get second just in front of Henrik Zetterberg, and it was a slogging finish at the end. Clary Green fourth, Lose Lad fifth.